My mother's blood spilled across the dinner table as I watched, paralyzed, at just 9 years old. That night, I learned that real monsters don't have claws or sharp teeth. They share your last name. My name is Ruth Anderson, now 76 years old. My white hair and wrinkled hands hide a story that few people know in this small town of Willow Creek in rural Kentucky. The younger folks just see me as the sweet old lady who sells homemade pies at the farmer's market on Sunday mornings, always with a smile and a kind word. If you look closely at me, you'll notice I smile with my lips, but my eyes hold an ancient sadness. These are the marks of a life that began in destruction, but that I slowly, painfully managed to rebuild. Sharing this story stirs everything inside me, so I'd like to ask for your support in the comments. Let me know where you're watching this video from. Please like it too, so I don't feel so alone carrying this burden. It means so much to know someone is listening after so many years of silence. Our home was far from town, about 2 miles down a dirt road that turned to mud during rainy seasons. It was a simple house, unpainted clapboard, with a roof that leaked at the corners during heavy storms. We had a large yard with tall grass, a few apple trees, chickens scratching in the yard, and an old mutt named Rusty who barked at everything that moved. We were a family like many others around there. My father William, my mother Eleanor, me and my little brother Tommy, 2 years younger than me. Daddy worked at the sawmill and came home smelling of timber and sweat. Mama took care of everything: the house, the children, the vegetable garden out back, and the laundry she took in to help with family expenses. Her hands never stopped working, always rough from labor, but at night they were gentle enough to stroke my hair until I fell asleep. Things started to change when I was about 7. Daddy began complaining of headaches that wouldn't go away no matter what. He said it felt like having a hammer pounding inside his head, day and night without stopping. He grew irritable, with any noise becoming reason to yell at all of us. Mama tried to calm him, said he needed to see the doctor in town, but he was stubborn, insisting it was just fatigue, that it would pass. It didn't pass. The headaches got worse, and with them came something that still gives me chills to remember. Daddy started having what Mama called episodes. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he would start shaking all over. His eyes would roll back, and he'd say things that made no sense. Sometimes he'd get violent, breaking plates, chairs, punching walls until his knuckles bled. "It's epilepsy," said Mrs. Miller, our closest neighbor who lived about a quarter mile away. "My cousin had it, needs controlled medicine." Mama convinced Daddy to go to the clinic after a particularly bad episode when he almost set the house on fire because he thought there were bugs crawling on the walls. The doctor prescribed some medicine, but it was expensive, hard to find, and Daddy rarely took it properly. He said it made him feel sluggish, that he couldn't work right while on it. I remember Mama hiding the medicine in his coffee, trying to trick him, but Daddy would notice and fly into a rage. "Trying to poison me, woman?" he'd shout, flipping the table, sending everything crashing to the floor. Tommy and I would run under the bed, holding each other, trembling with fear. The episodes got worse. Daddy started seeing and hearing things that weren't there. He'd talk to people who weren't present, argue with voices in his own head. Some days he didn't recognize any of us, called Mama by other names, said Tommy and I were devil's children who had broken into his house. Mama tried to protect us as best she could. When she sensed an episode coming, she'd send us to Mrs. Miller's or hide us in the storage shed out back where we kept tools and supplies. "Stay quiet with your brother," she'd whisper. "Don't make a sound no matter what you hear." And we heard terrible things. Screams, objects breaking, Mama's muffled crying, Daddy's senseless accusations. Sometimes he'd say she had other men, that she was trying to steal his money, that she wanted to kill him in his sleep. One day, when we returned home after an episode, I found Mama sitting on the back doorstep, her eye bruised, her lips split. She tried to hide it with her hand, gave a weak smile when she saw me. "It's nothing, Ruth." I tripped and hit the corner of the table. I knew it was a lie, but I pretended to believe because it was easier that way. The situation worsened with each passing month. Daddy lost his job at the sawmill after having a violent episode there and threatening a co-worker with a chisel. He started drinking more, mixing whiskey with his medication when he took it, which only made everything worse. Money got tight. We depended more and more on what Mama earned taking in laundry and what we could grow in our garden. "Why don't we leave, Mama?" I asked one night, after Daddy had finally fallen asleep after breaking half the dishes in the kitchen. We were cleaning up the mess, trying to make as little noise as possible. "Where would we go, sweetheart?" she answered, her eyes tired, looking older than her 32 years. "I don't have any family left, no money saved. And your daddy, he's not a bad man, Ruth. It's the sickness. Somewhere inside that confused head is still the man I loved, your father." I wanted to believe her. I truly did. Sometimes, on good days, when the pain eased and he took his medicine properly, we'd glimpse the daddy from before. He'd sit on the wooden bench in the yard, call us over to watch the sunset, tell stories from his childhood, whistle those old tunes while fixing something around the house. In those moments, Mama would look at him with such love it hurt, as if she wanted to hold on to those moments forever. But the good days became increasingly rare until they almost disappeared completely. The episodes were now almost daily, and in between them, Daddy was constantly suspicious, irritable, paranoid. It was on a Wednesday night. I'll never forget it. It was raining hard outside, one of those summer storms that seems determined to tear the roof off. The sound of the raindrops hitting our tin roof was deafening. Tommy and I were already in bed, pretending to sleep. But I was alert, as I always was on rainy nights, because Daddy hated storms. Said the noise made the voices in his head louder. I heard Mama scream, then the sound of a chair falling. Nothing unusual, unfortunately. I pulled the blanket over Tommy's head. He had already started crying softly. "Shh, it'll pass," I lied, as I always did. But that night was different. The screams grew louder. I heard Mama begging, "William, for God's sake, put that down. You don't know what you're doing." Then came a sound I'd never heard before, like a watermelon falling and cracking on the ground. A dull thud, followed by a wet sound. Then, silence. Just the sound of the rain outside. That silence terrified me more than any scream. I got out of bed, even though I knew I shouldn't. "Stay here," I whispered to Tommy. "Don't leave for anything." I walked down the dark hallway, my bare feet making the old wooden floorboards creak. The kitchen door was ajar, a sliver of light escaping. I pushed it open gently, just a little, just enough to see. The image is burned into my mind to this day, like a photograph that never fades. Mama fallen on the cold cement floor, a trickle of blood running from her head, forming a pool that slowly grew larger. In Daddy's hand was the wooden pestle she used to grind spices, now stained red. His eyes were glazed over as if in a trance. "The voices stopped," he said, his voice calmer than I'd heard in a long time. "They finally stopped. I don't know if he saw me there, frozen in horror. I just know I ran back to the room, grabbed Tommy's hand, and hid us in the closet, where we stayed huddled together, shaking until dawn." What happened that night and in the days that followed is so painful that even after almost 70 years, my hands tremble trying to put it into words. But I need to tell it. I need you to know, because the real nightmare was only beginning. When the sun rose that Thursday, I was still in the closet, holding Tommy, who had managed to fall asleep between sobs. My whole body ached from being cramped, but what hurt more was the silence that filled the house. A heavy silence, as if the world had stopped breathing along with Mama. I heard footsteps down the hallway, our bedroom door opening. "Ruth? Tommy?" Daddy's voice sounded normal, almost like the one I knew before the illness took over. For a delirious second, I thought it had all been a terrible nightmare, that I would wake up and find Mama in the kitchen making cornbread, the smell filling the house. But that's not what happened. Daddy found us in the closet. His eyes were different. Not glazed over like during his episodes, not angry like they were afterward. They were empty, like dry wells where you can't see the bottom. "Come," he said with a frightening calmness. "We need to fix things. As if he could repair what had happened, as if he could piece our shattered family back together. When we left the bedroom, I saw he had already wrapped Mama's body in a sheet. There were dark stains on the kitchen floor that he had tried to clean. The smell of blood mixed with bleach made me sick. "Your daddy's sick, but he'll take care of you," he said, talking about himself in the third person, as if he were someone else. Maybe in his mind, he was. We're not going to tell anyone what happened. It was an accident. She slipped. Do you understand? Tommy started crying again, softly. Daddy grabbed his arms roughly. Understand, boy? She slipped. I nodded quickly, pulling Tommy close to me. Yes, Daddy. We understand. That morning, while the rain still fell outside, Daddy dug a hole in the backyard, behind the chicken coop. He buried Mama there, with no coffin, no preacher, nothing but the blood-stained sheet. We watched from the bedroom window, unable to cry, as if our tears had dried up from so much fear. In the days that followed, Daddy told the neighbors that Mama had gone to visit a sick cousin in Louisville. Nobody questioned it much. People avoided our house because of Daddy's peculiarities. Mrs. Miller even offered to help with us while Mama was away. But Daddy refused, saying he could manage. Life continued in a frightening, strange normality. Daddy sent us to school, cooked meals. Badly, very badly, nothing like Mama's. Washed our clothes carelessly. Sometimes he seemed almost normal, as if the illness had improved. He spoke little, but had no violent episodes. Later, I understood that he had stopped taking his medicine completely, but he had also stopped drinking. It was as if he was living in another world, a world where none of that had happened. Nights were worse. I would lie in bed with Tommy, hugging each other as always, but now without the comfort of knowing Mama was in the room next door. Instead, we knew she was in the backyard, under the damp earth, alone in the darkness. It was on one of those nights, perhaps 2 weeks later, that I heard our bedroom door open slowly. It wasn't unusual for Daddy to come check if we were sleeping, so I pretended I was, as I always did. But this time was different. I felt the mattress sink with his weight as he sat on the edge of the bed. So much like her, he whispered, running his hand through my hair. Same hair, same eyes. I kept my eyes closed, breathing slowly, praying he would leave soon. But the hand continued, moving down my face, my neck, to places no father should touch his daughter. That night, something inside me broke forever, something that all the time in the world couldn't completely mend. I learned a lesson no child should learn. Sometimes the monster doesn't just live in your house. He's your own flesh and blood. The nights became a recurring nightmare. I tried to lock the door, but he tore off the latch. I tried to stay awake, but exhaustion won. I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth with hands that smelled of earth and sweat. And during the day, he acted as if nothing had happened, as if we were a normal family, just without Mom. Tommy sensed something was wrong, but he was too young to understand. He only knew that the sister who had always protected him now cried in hiding and trembled when their father approached. I started sending him to sleep at Mrs. Miller's whenever I could, making up excuses. At least he would be safe. At school, my grades plummeted. The teacher called Daddy in for a talk, concerned about my sudden change. She was always smiling. Now she doesn't talk to anyone. Has something happened, Mr. Anderson? It's missing her mother, he answered, his face a perfect mask of a concerned father. We're all feeling it badly. Her cousin is very ill. It'll be a while before she returns. The teacher believed him, of course. Who would suspect that seemingly respectable man, a widower, though nobody knew, taking care of his children alone? I tried to tell someone once, Mrs. Miller. My daddy does things to me at night, I managed to say, my voice almost disappearing. Things he shouldn't. She looked at me with pity, but also with disbelief. Child, don't make up stories. Your daddy's sick, does things without meaning to sometimes, but that's not what you're talking about. You must have seen something somewhere and you're getting confused. After that, I didn't try again. Who would believe a 9-year-old girl against an adult's word? The months dragged on, each day feeling like an eternity. I started losing weight, having terrible nightmares, jumping in fear when anyone touched me. But nobody noticed, or if they did, they chose not to see. On one of the darkest nights of my life, when the smell of whiskey was again coming from Daddy's breath, when his hands were rougher than usual, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't let this happen to Tommy, too, when he got a little older. I couldn't allow that man, whom I once called Daddy, to destroy what was left of our family. That night, while he finally slept, his loud snoring filling the house, I got up silently. My decision was made. If nobody would help me, I would have to help myself. In the kitchen cabinet, way in the back, was the bottle of rat poison that Daddy used. It had a skull drawing on the front, warning of the danger. Mama always kept it far from our reach, afraid we might touch it by accident. I held the bottle in my small, trembling hands, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I was 9 years old, but I wasn't a child anymore. Childhood ended that rainy night when Mama's blood stained the kitchen floor. The plan was simple. Daddy drank black coffee every morning, strong and with lots of sugar. The bitter taste of the poison would be disguised. Just enough and it would all be over. Tommy and I would run to town, say he had one of his episodes, that he fell alone. Nobody would doubt it. Everyone knew about his strangeness. But while I stood there, poison in hand, something strange happened. I had the feeling Mama was beside me. I could almost smell the cheap perfume she wore to church on Sundays. A voice inside me said, "That's not the way to solve this, baby girl." I don't know if it was really her spirit, if it was my own conscience, or just fear of the consequences. I know I put the poison back in the cabinet and returned to the bedroom, crying silently. But that night wasn't in vain. Even though I couldn't go through with the most drastic plan, something awakened in me. The will to fight, to survive, to find another way out. I wouldn't be a victim forever. I needed to be smart, patient, and wait for the right moment. And the moment came sooner than I expected, in a way I never could have predicted. The next morning, I woke up different. There was a clarity within me that I hadn't felt in months. As I made the coffee, looking through the kitchen window at the spot where Mama was buried, I decided that truth would be my weapon. I couldn't use poison. That would make me just like him. But I could use the truth buried in our backyard. The truth that nobody knew, except the three of us. Sheriff Johnson came every first Monday of the month to check on the outlying families, see if everything was in order, if the children were going to school. It was part of a new government program. His visit was 2 days away. During those 2 days, I pretended better than ever. I smiled when Daddy talked to me, didn't flinch when he came near me, cooked the way he liked. He was suspicious at first, watching me with those eyes that now always seemed clouded, like the sky before a storm. "You're different, girl. What's gotten into you?" "Nothing, Daddy. Just missing Mama and thought I should help more around the house." He seemed to believe it. Or maybe it was convenient to believe. At night, when he came to my room, I let him do what he wanted without fighting, swallowing the tears and disgust, thinking only of the 2 days left until liberation would come. When Sheriff Johnson arrived that Monday, mounted on his brown horse, I was waiting by the gate. I had sent Tommy to stay at Mrs. Miller's since early morning, saying I was going to help Daddy clean the chicken coop and it would smell bad. "Morning, Sheriff Johnson," I greeted, trying to appear as normal as possible. "Morning, little one. Is your father home?" "Yes, but he's still sleeping. He had an episode last night. The medicine makes him drowsy." The sheriff nodded, understanding. Everyone knew about my daddy's episodes. "Can I show you something?" I asked, my heart beating so hard I thought he could hear it. "It's a secret, but you need to see." "What kind of secret, child?" "It's about my mama. She didn't go to Louisville to visit any cousin." The sheriff's face changed, grew serious. He dismounted. "What are you trying to say?" "Come with me, please." I led him to the backyard, behind the chicken coop. The spot where Mama was buried still had a small mound of earth visible, despite the time that had passed. I pointed silently. "What's here, child?" "My Mama." My voice came out steady, despite the tears that started to fall. "Daddy killed her on a rainy night, hit her head with a pestle. I saw it." The sheriff went pale. He looked at me, then at the mound of earth, then back at me. "Are you sure about what you're saying?" "That's a very serious accusation." "I'm sure. He buried her here, wrapped her in a flowered sheet, the one she liked. If you dig, you'll see it's true." I won't describe what happened next. How they dug and found Mama's body, already decomposing, but still recognizable by the blue bead necklace she never took off, a gift from her grandmother. How Daddy woke up with the noise and ran from the house, shouting that the voices had told him to do it, that it wasn't his fault. Nor will I tell how he was captured 3 days later, hiding in a cave by the creek, delirious and talking to himself. How he confessed everything, not just Mama's death, but what he did to me on those dark nights. how some men from town wanted to take justice into their own hands before the police took him away. What matters is that he went to jail and never came back. I learned years later that he died in prison, in a fight with other inmates who found out what he had done to his own daughter. I felt nothing when I got the news. No joy, no sadness, just an emptiness where once there had been so much fear and anger. Tommy and I went to live with Aunt Martha, Daddy's sister, whom we didn't even know existed. She lived in Cincinnati, was unmarried, worked as a nurse in a large hospital. She had never wanted children, but she welcomed us with open arms, as if she had been waiting for us all her life. "Blood is blood," she said when we arrived. Two frightened children, holding hands with a small bundle of clothes each. Your family. Aunt Martha was different from anyone we had ever known. She wore pants instead of dresses, drove her own car, worked outside the home, and wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Back home, women whispered that she was too modern. That's why she hadn't found a husband. But to me, she was exactly what we needed. In those first months, I had nightmares almost every night. I would wake up screaming in a cold sweat, images of Mama's blood and Daddy's hands haunting me in the dark. Aunt Martha never lost patience. She would come to my room, turn on the light — we had electric lights in the big city — sit on the edge of the bed, and stay with me until I calmed down. "What happened to you was terrible, Ruth," she would say straightforwardly, "but it doesn't define who you are. You're more than this. One day, this pain will just be a scar, not an open wound anymore." At first, I didn't believe her. How could I overcome something so horrible? How could I live a normal life after seeing and experiencing what I had? But Aunt Martha was persistent. She enrolled me in a good school, found a psychologist for me, something I had never heard of back home, encouraged me to do other things besides studying, swimming, piano, painting, anything to occupy my mind and body, to build new memories on top of the old ones. "You need to learn to live again, child. Not just survive." With time, the nightmares became less frequent. I started smiling again, making friends at school, looking in the mirror without feeling ashamed of my own body. Tommy also flourished in the big city. Soon he was running through the streets with the neighborhood boys, playing baseball, coming home with scraped knees and 1,000 stories to tell. At 15, I decided I wanted to be a teacher. I remembered my own teacher back home, Miss Stevens, who had noticed something was wrong with me but didn't know how to help. I thought about how many children must be going through what I went through, in silence, with no one to reach out to them. I wanted to make a difference in those children's lives. Aunt Martha supported my decision and helped me enter the normal school. Those were difficult but rewarding years. By 18, I was already teaching in a neighborhood school for preschool children. Seeing those little faces light up when they learned something new was like a balm to my wounded soul. Life went on. Tommy graduated from medical school, to Aunt Martha's pride. I met Jim at a school function where I taught. He was the father of one of my students, a recent widower with a 5-year-old son to raise alone. We started talking about the challenges of raising children, then about music, literature, and before I knew it, we were dating. It was difficult for me. Even after so many years, a man's touch still awakened memories I preferred to forget. Jim noticed my discomfort and was patient, respectful. When I finally told him about my past, he cried with me, holding my hands gently. "None of that matters to me," he said. "What matters is who you are today, Ruth, and you're the strongest, kindest woman I've ever met." We married on a spring Sunday in 1970. I was 24 and felt like I was really beginning to live for the first time. Jim, his son Mark, and I formed a family I never imagined I could have. 3 years later, we had our daughter, Emily, a little girl with curly hair and an easy smile who became the center of our world. Holding my newborn daughter in my arms, I promised her what no one had been able to promise me, that she would always be safe, always be loved, that no monster would ever reach her as long as I lived. The revenge I planned as a child, using truth as a weapon against my father, wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a long journey of healing, rebuilding, and finally, a full life that no one could have predicted for that frightened little girl from rural Kentucky. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see Mama's blood flowing across the kitchen floor. I still feel Daddy's weight sitting on the edge of my bed. But these memories don't have the power they once had. They are ghosts from a past that can no longer hurt me. The real justice wasn't my father's imprisonment or death. It was that I managed to live, to love, to build a healthy family, to break the cycle of violence that could have consumed me. It was discovering that even from the ashes of the worst tragedy, flowers can grow. The years passed, my children grew up, and many things changed in America and the world. Looking back, I see a life full of ups and downs, like any other. But the shadows of the past never completely left me. Jim was a good husband, a decent man who helped me rebuild my trust in others and in myself. We were together for 35 years until lung cancer took him in 2005. They were good years, despite the normal difficulties of any marriage. We raised our children with love and respect, values I learned from my mother in the few years I was with her, and from Aunt Martha afterward. Mark, the son Jim brought to our marriage, became as much mine as if I had given birth to him. He became an engineer, married young, and gave me 3 grandchildren who are the light of my eyes. Emily, my biological daughter, followed in my footsteps and became a teacher. But she went further. Today she runs a school for underprivileged children in Cincinnati's outskirts. Tommy, my brother, built a career as a pediatrician. He always jokes that he chose to care for children because of me, because I took care of him when no one else could. Even with an apparently happy and fulfilled life, I carried a secret that weighed inside me. For decades, no one but Jim, Aunt Martha, and Tommy knew what had happened in that house in Kentucky. Not my children, not my work colleagues, no one. Why revisit those bad things, Ruth? Aunt Martha would say when the subject came up between us. The past is behind you. But it wasn't. Not completely. The past has a strange way of catching up with us when we least expect it. I was 50 when I had my first collapse. I was teaching 3rd grade when a new student arrived. A skinny boy with frightened eyes and finger marks on his arms. I looked at those marks and suddenly I wasn't in the classroom anymore. I was back in that house in Kentucky, feeling Daddy's hands on my small body. I fainted in front of the class. When I woke up in the school infirmary, I knew I needed to face what I had kept buried for so long. I couldn't keep pretending that frightened little girl wasn't a part of me. That's when I started therapy, already middle-aged. The psychologist, Dr. Sarah, was half my age, but had a wisdom that impressed me from day one. Trauma doesn't disappear with time, Mrs. Ruth, she explained. It stays stored in the body, in memory, but we can learn to live with it differently. In the years that followed, I unearthed memories I had pushed to the back of my mind. I cried tears I thought had dried up decades ago. I faced the anger, at my mother for not protecting me better, at my father for destroying our family, at God for allowing it all to happen. Anger is part of the process, Dr. Sarah would say. You don't need to be ashamed of it. Gradually, I came to understand that my father was a sick man, not just evil, that my mother had done the best she could with the tools she had, that I, a 9-year-old child, couldn't have done anything differently. Forgiveness didn't come easily or all at once. It came in small drops, like raindrops filling a bucket. I first forgave my mother, then myself. My father was the hardest. Sometimes I think I'm still in the process. At 60, I made a decision that would again change the course of my life. I decided to tell my story to my children. Emily cried when I told her. Mark sat in silence, his eyes fixed on a distant point, as if trying to process what he was hearing. Then they hugged me in a way they never had before, not as children hugging their mother, but as adults trying to protect someone they love. Why did you never tell us before? Emily asked, wiping away tears. I wanted to protect you, I answered honestly. I wanted you to grow up without the weight of this story. And maybe I was also ashamed, afraid of judgment. Ashamed of what, Mom? Mark seemed genuinely surprised. You were a victim, a survivor. That word, survivor, echoed in me for days. I had never thought of myself that way. I had always been the victim, the poor thing, the one carrying invisible scars. But survivor, that sounded like something positive, something strong. After that conversation, something changed inside me. I started talking more openly about my experience. Not to just anyone, of course, but to people who could benefit from hearing that it's possible to rebuild a life after so much suffering. I participated in support groups for women victims of violence. I gave talks at schools about signs of child abuse. I became a volunteer at a shelter for children rescued from violent homes. With each story I told, each hand I shook, the weight I carried seemed to lessen a bit, not because I was forgetting, but because I was giving a new meaning to those painful memories. They were no longer just the story of the girl who suffered. They were the story of the woman who survived and decided to help others survive too. At 70, when I was already retired from teaching, but still active in volunteering, I received an unusual invitation. A journalist wanted to interview survivors of child abuse for a documentary. My name had been suggested by one of the shelter coordinators. My first impulse was to refuse. It was one thing to share my story in small groups, but quite another to do it for a camera, for strangers to see. But then I thought about how many people could benefit, how many children could be saved if more people paid attention to the signs. "I'll do it," I said to Jim that night. Even after years since his passing, I still talk to him before sleeping. I think it's time to let this story come completely out of the shadows. The interview was difficult. Reliving everything in detail, in front of strangers, with lights and cameras pointed at me, was one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life. But when I finished, I felt such relief that I almost floated out of the chair. The documentary, Voices of Silence, won awards, was shown in schools, universities, police stations. I received hundreds of letters and emails. My granddaughter taught me to use a computer at 72, from people who identified with my story, who found the courage to seek help after hearing me speak. One of those letters deeply touched me. It was from an 85-year-old woman who wrote with a trembling hand, "Dear Ruth, I never told anyone what my stepfather did to me when I was 12 years old. I carried this secret for 73 years, thinking I would die with it. After seeing your testimony, I told my daughter. It was like taking a piano off my back. Thank you for giving me courage." I cried, reading those words. I thought about how silence imprisons us, how we keep secrets thinking we're protecting ourselves, when in fact we're just feeding the darkness. Now, at 76, sitting in this rocking chair on my porch, looking at the busy street in Cincinnati, so different from that dirt road of my childhood, I realize that my story isn't just about pain and overcoming. It's about the importance of truth, even when it hurts. It's about breaking the silence that protects abusers and imprisons victims. What happened to me still happens today to thousands of children in America and around the world. Children who, like me, have no voice, nowhere to run, no one to believe them. Children who live in homes that should be safe, but that have become prisons of fear. If you're listening to me now and you're one of those children, I want you to know it's not your fault. It never was. You deserve to be protected, loved, respected. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Don't give up looking for help until you find someone who believes you. And if you're an adult who suffered abuse in childhood and still carries that secret, know that it's never too late to start healing those wounds. Silence only protects those who hurt you. Your story, as painful as it may be, could be the light that guides someone else out of darkness. Getting old has a curious way of bringing back memories we thought were forgotten. Now, approaching 80, I feel the past knocking on my door with renewed force. It's as if time, instead of diluting memories, distills them, leaving only the essence. Sometimes sweet, often bitter, but always intense. My grandchildren often ask me how I managed to overcome everything I lived through. The truth is, I never completely overcame it. You don't overcome trauma of this magnitude. You just learn to live with it. Like a tree that grows around a wire that wounded it, the scar remains incorporated into the trunk, becomes part of its structure. When I turned 65, I did something I never imagined I would do. I went back to Willow Creek. The town had changed so much I barely recognized it. They had paved the main streets, built a large supermarket, even a bank branch. The creek where Tommy and I used to play had been channeled. The house where I grew up no longer existed. In its place was a bakery with tables on the sidewalk. I walked to where our property used to be, where everything happened. A young waiter served me coffee. I sat there, exactly on the spot where my mother was hastily buried, where my childhood was destroyed on a rainy night. The coffee was hot and sweet. I drank slowly, feeling the warmth go down my throat, chasing away the cold that always invades me when I visit this past. "Are you from around here?" asked the young man, noticing my distant gaze. I was, A long time ago. I didn't say more. What would be the point? That boy hadn't been born when it all happened. For him, this was just his father's bakery, a business like any other. The ghosts I saw there belonged only to me. During that trip, I also visited the local cemetery. After my story gained notoriety with the documentary, the town council arranged for my mother's body to be transferred to a proper grave. I brought flowers, red carnations, like those she used to grow on our porch. I stayed there a while, silently talking to her, telling her about my children, my grandchildren, about the life I built despite everything. You would be proud, Mama, I whispered before leaving. It was a visit of closure, of farewell. I haven't gone back since, nor do I plan to. Some doors need to be closed so we can move forward. At 70, I lost Tommy, my brother, my accomplice, the only person in the world who had lived through part of the same nightmare as me, passed away after a battle with Alzheimer's. It was a terrible disease that made him lose pieces of his memory, bit by bit. By the end, he didn't recognize me anymore, confused me with our mother. Mama, I'm scared. Daddy's yelling again, he would say, his eyes lost in a past I wished he could forget. His departure left a hole in me that nothing could fill. It was as if the last witness to my story had disappeared, leaving me alone with my memories, with no one to confirm. Yes, this really happened. It wasn't just a nightmare. Aunt Martha had passed years before, taking with her that strength that supported me when I needed it most. Jim, too. The people who held us when we were falling embark on their own journeys, leaving us behind with the task of continuing to live, of passing on what we've learned. It was after Tommy's death that I began writing my memoirs, not to publish, just to ensure this story wouldn't die with me. So my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, when I'm no longer here, can better understand who their grandmother was, where the strength everyone says they see in me came from. Writing was therapeutic. Each word placed on paper was like a small headstone laid on a grave, finally sealing a past that for so long remained open, exposed, bleeding. When I finished the manuscript, I gave a copy to each of my children. Emily cried when she received hers. Mark held the envelope against his chest for a long time before he could speak. "Thank you for trusting us with this, Mom," he said. "We'll keep it with all due respect." In 2020, when the pandemic arrived, bringing fear and isolation, I discovered that my life experiences had somehow prepared me to face crises. While many fell into despair with the confinement, I found strength in the memory of other isolations, other prisons I had already overcome. I supported my grandchildren through video calls, yet another technology I had to learn, told stories to my young great-grandchildren, organized an online prayer group with friends from church. Somehow, my age, which many would see as a vulnerability factor, became my greatest strength. I had seen so much, survived so much, that a pandemic, although frightening, wouldn't bring me down. "Grandma is indestructible," joked my grandson Peter during one of our calls. Not quite, I thought to myself. I'm not indestructible. I was destroyed several times throughout my life, but I learned to rebuild myself, piece by piece, becoming stronger at the broken places. Recently, Emily invited me to speak to the teachers at the school she runs. It was a training session on identifying signs of child abuse. I hesitated at first. I'm too old for these things, I thought. But I ended up accepting. Sitting before those young women, full of energy and hope, I told my story once more. I spoke of the rain pouring that night, of the sound the pestle made as it hit my mother's head, of my father's hands violating my innocence, of the decision to use truth as a weapon against him. I also talked about rebuilding, about therapy, about difficult and incomplete forgiveness. When I finished, a young teacher raised her hand. She had tears in her eyes. "How did you manage not to become a bitter person after all that?" The question caught me off guard. I had never thought much about it. After a few seconds of reflection, I answered, "I think it was a daily choice. Each morning when I woke up, I had to decide, will I let what happened to me define who I am today, or will I use it as strength to build something different?" It wasn't always easy to choose the harder path. There were days when bitterness seemed the only possible option. But at some point I realized that if I chose hatred and bitterness, My father would continue destroying me, even after his death. And I couldn't allow that. Growing old means facing finitude with greater clarity each day. At 76, I know I have more past than future ahead of me. But that doesn't frighten me as much as it should. I've lived enough, loved enough, suffered more than enough. I'm ready for whatever comes next, whatever it may be. I look back and see a long, winding road. Some parts were so dark I could barely see a step ahead. Others were illuminated by a kind of joy that only those who have known deep pain can truly appreciate. It was a full life, complete, with its pains and beauties. If I could give advice to that 9-year-old girl, frightened, hidden in a closet while her world fell apart, I would simply say, hold on, little one. The road will be long and difficult, but you'll make it. One day, you'll be an old woman sitting on a porch, watching the sunset, surrounded by people who love you. One day, you'll tell your story and help others survive their own storms. And on that day, you'll understand that in some mysterious way we can't fully comprehend, nothing was in vain. If my story has touched your heart in any way, I ask you to share it with others who might need to hear this message of hope. Click the like button so more people can learn about this story and perhaps find courage for their own battles. Subscribe to our channel to follow other true stories of survival and faith that we publish daily. And don't forget to join our WhatsApp group through the link in the video description. There we share real stories daily before they appear on this channel, along with words of faith and hope to start your day right. It's a welcoming community where you can find support and friendship. Because in the end, this is what saves us. Knowing we're not alone in our struggles, that others have walked through similar valleys and found their way back to the light. May God be with you today and always.